everyone. Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations. My name is Danielle Perry and I am the host. You already know I'm excited that you're tuned in for another episode of this podcast. And if this is your first time, this is a podcast which features people of all ages, and they share a bit of their story about how God has helped them to overcome a difficult challenge, situation, or a season in their lives, or maybe they're on their way to overcoming with God's help. And they do share authentically. Well, I am excited, y'all, about this episode, which is episode 26. It features a dear friend of mine, Mrs. Tatiana Bell, and the title of this episode is Taking God Seriously After Losing My Daughter. Tatiana, thank you again for just sharing a bit of your story on this podcast, and I know it's going to bless others in your shoes. For those who don't know, Tatiana and I met through my husband because they used to be co-workers. They worked at the same school for a season, and since then, I've also met her husband, and Jared and I have been on double dates with them, and it's just been a joy just spending time with them and just having great conversations. And I know that God has such a major plan for their lives, and he's going to continue to do mighty things in and through their marriage. I know that you probably weren't expecting me to say that, Tatiana, but I just felt led to say that God is going to absolutely do mighty things through you and Eric's lives, individually and together. So I can't wait to see all that he's going to do. But y'all, without further ado, here it is, episode 26. Enjoy and be blessed. Hey, Mrs. Tatiana Bell.
How are you doing today?
I am well. How are you?
Doing great.
Awesome. Thank you again for being a part, taking time out of your busy schedule, because you are a busy woman as you're building your business.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being a part. And I know that what you'll share today will definitely bless people who hear and listen, who hear and watch.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So the title of this episode is Taking God Seriously After Losing My Daughter. You've shared a bit with me over the phone a while back, sort of like a synopsis of your story, but I know I'm probably going to learn more as we go on with this interview. So before we hop into the questions, I want you to introduce yourself and just tell a little bit about who you are.
All right. So my name is Tatiana Bell. I am a former educator. Sorry, words today.
You're fine.
I've been in and out of education since I was 18 years old, and recently decided to quit teaching in Baltimore City schools and move on to being a full-time artist.
Yes.
So that's been exciting. And I'm married to my high school sweetheart, Eric Bell. And we recently moved back to Maryland from Florida about 4 years ago. So that's been an adventure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. And I'm going to have you shout out your business at the end.
Okay.
So we are going to start out by having you talk to us a little bit about what was your childhood like growing up?
So if I were going to sum it up in one word, I'd say unpredictable.
Okay.
I feel like my childhood was a little chaotic, not as chaotic as most, but I really felt unsure a lot of the times. My parents got divorced really young. I think they started to break up when I was about 5, and by the time I was in the 2nd grade, my mom had fully moved out, and we were living with my dad. And that was, really different because up until that point, my mom had pretty much been a stay-at-home mom. So I was used to her. So that was a little jarring. And then after a while, my dad moved out and my mom moved back in with her new boyfriend. And so that was a whole other level of chaos. So I just remember, trying to keep my siblings in order, trying to keep things calm, trying to keep things safe. But, we did attend church. My dad was raised Episcopalian. My grandfather was a lay minister. My great-grandfather was a minister. So they were very much in the church.
Okay.
And my mom, she went to Catholic school. She was raised Catholic. But outside of going to church on Sundays, and not listening to secular music on Sundays and like little things like that, I really didn't understand what church was or
Right.
what God was
Okay.
and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many siblings do you have again?
I'm the oldest of 5.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know why I didn't know you had 5.
Yep.
Or you were the oldest of 5.
Yep.
Okay.
3 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay. Okay. So we're gonna actually fast forward
Okay.
to your senior year of high school,
Okay.
because that's when you got saved, correct?
Correct.
So what led to that?
So I remember my mom, like we had stopped going to church for a while, and then we started going to a church in, I think, Rockville called Church of the Redeemer. My mom started listening to like Joyce Meyer's tapes and things like that, and just all of a sudden was like hungry for God again. I remember right around the same time my grandma as well was kind of on fire. And so my mom started taking us to Church of the Redeemer, and I remember every Sunday they would kind of do an altar call. So one of the Sundays, everyone was with their eyes closed, supposedly, except for me. And I saw my brother put his hand up, and I was kind of like, And it kind of like compelled me to also put my hand up. And at the end of church service, they handed us like a New Testament Bible and like these little battlefield books and things like that. And so I remembered that specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you say your brother raising his hand compelled you.
Yeah.
What did you feel inside? Like, did you know how serious this step was that you were taking?
No, not at all. Up until that point, I kind of had my own relationship with God. After, I was saved, that's when I realized, I was like, oh, that's what that was. I felt before I went to sleep, I would talk to God and, pray for the children in Iraq. Just like felt these weird, compelling things to do. Sometimes I read my Bible, and sometimes I listen to worship music when no one else was doing it, but didn't really understood why. And so even giving my life, I didn't understand why I felt like I should, but it just felt like I should.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure that's a few, probably several people's testimony.
Yeah.
We don't always realize, like, this is actually the most important decision of your life.
Exactly. Yeah.
So your college years, right?
Yeah.
You shared with me that you lived it up.
I did.
So talk about that, and just what were some of your experiences in college?
Yeah. So I don't think anything happens by accident. So I'm pretty sure the Holy Spirit was like, let's get some hooks in her before she goes outside.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a very, very, very strict household. My mom is the product of abuse and kidnap and all kinds. So she was always afraid that something was going to happen to us.
Okay.
So if the girl had a brother or a father, which was usually the case, I couldn't go. I never slept at people's houses except for my friend. She lived behind us.
Okay.
So I slept at her house maybe twice. Never was allowed to go to parties. Really couldn't do much. And always punished. And so when I got to college, it was really my first, I never been to camp. So this is my first time like being outside. So I lived it up to the fullest. I would, if there was a party on Wednesday, I was going on Wednesday. I partied probably Monday through Sunday. I would go to anything that I could go to, be involved in anything I could be involved in, and just, I was unsupervised.
Yeah, unsupervised. And what college did you attend?
Syracuse University. It was one of the top party schools in the nation at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
So were you enjoying yourself?
I was having a blast. I was, to be honest, I was. I didn't have a care in the world. No one was telling me to stop, and I was just doing whatever felt exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what year of college, because you encountered a woman
Yes.
that I believe basically reminded you of the importance of God,
Kept
right?
me tethered.
Yes.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So again, just with that little nudging to give my life to Christ, all of a sudden I needed my hair done. And when I was living in Maryland, my mom would drive me to DC to get my hair done. So I didn't know, I have curly hair, but I couldn't find anybody who could do my hair. And so I was in, I can't even remember what it was, some multicultural society, and they had an office. And I went in there asking them, and they had this woman's business card. And so I called her up, made an appointment with her, and I went, and she was from Panama, and I think I ended up getting my hair done for free. Mm-hmm. She was just amazing. She invited me to church. And then she was persistent, like all 4 years. She would honk outside my door. It didn't matter if I picked up the phone or whatnot. She was picking me up on Sundays, and I was staying with her the whole day.
Wow.
And she became really pivotal. I had some of my first Holy Spirit experiences at that church, and it was because she would force me to come. A lot of times I would sit there and shake my head and didn't want to hear what the preacher had to say, because it didn't line up with what I believed was right and true. But the Holy Spirit would get me every time I was in there.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So when did you meet her again in college?
Freshman year.
It's your freshman year.
That was my freshman year.
So Monday through Saturday, partying.
Yep.
And then on Sundays.
And Sunday, too. I would go to church. And then after church, that's what I'm saying. Like, for me, I had no one was telling me what to do. And everything it was open season.
So hilarious. And did she know that about you?
I'm sure she did. Knowing what I know about the Spirit and things like that, I think that's why she was so persistent, because she saw what God was already doing in me. And she loved me she was a stranger, and she loved me enough to make sure I was going to church. It wasn't just a older woman it was almost like an auntie or a mom. She was very like attentive to my needs. If I needed food, if I couldn't pay to get my hair done, she made sure that I was straight. And so I think that was like the Spirit speaking to the Spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You ever reached out to her, or has she reached out to you?
No, oddly enough. I remember one time bumping into her business card, but never following through with it. Still, and that was right after when I had gotten saved and moved to Florida. And I still felt so much shame from how I had been living that I couldn't reach out to her.
I understand that. Okay. So even with all of the partying and just craziness that was going on during college, were you receiving things spiritually?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
For, not to sound woo-woo, for a while in college, I wondered if I even might have had powers or something, because I would hear God's voice so audibly and he would instruct me. And I didn't know what that was.
Wow.
No one had really discipled me. And so it became weird.
Wow.
And so some of my closer friends knew about it, but like nobody really knew.
Wow.
Because it was just weird to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So talk about after you graduated college, now you're not on campus. Maybe you're not around some of the same people. Where's your mindset, and how are you spiritually at that point?
So when it came time to graduate college, I was super lost. I didn't even go to my graduation. I was very depressed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know where I was going. I had decided probably my junior year that I did not want to go into fashion design. So, and my senior year was very difficult. I just realized that my value system and who I was, even at that time, didn't line up with what I needed to do to be successful in that industry. Gotcha. So I felt like I had wasted my time almost. And because of a lot of the cattiness and the competition, I didn't even have the confidence that I was even good at what I was doing. And so I just didn't know what to do. And so then I moved to Maryland, and I was just still lost. So I kind of just was floundering, really. Felt very lost, disappointed in myself, and discouraged.
So did you move to Maryland right away, or?
Yeah. On graduation day, instead of going to my graduation, I packed up a U-Haul truck and started driving home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You said forget graduation.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So at some point, though, you get back to Maryland and you live in Baltimore and you start your own fashion line. So talk about that.
So when I first moved to Maryland, I couldn't find a job. I tried McDonald's. I tried everywhere. Wasn't getting hired. And so
McDonald's wouldn't hire you?
McDonald's said I was overqualified and would not hire me. And it was so stressful because I couldn't get into the fashion industry because I had to actually work. I didn't have all the internships everybody else had. So they were hiring them, and I was having to figure out how to get my foot in the door.
Right.
And so I couldn't find any work. And so then my dad's very well connected in the city. And so he encouraged me to do certain things. So he brought me to this woman called the Tiny Tailor. I think she was on Charles Street. She recently passed.
Okay.
And she started introducing me to the boutique owner. She was kind of like the mama of the block. I don't know if you've ever been to that part of Charles Street where all the boutiques are. Well, people would buy from those boutiques and then take it to her to get them tailored. And so she'd been there the longest. And so she was like the mother of the block. So she introduced me to all the different boutique owners. And that's when I started. I did Baltimore Fashion Week. Oddly enough, couldn't get hired at McDonald's, but won the McDonald's award for illustrations.
Okay.
And just different things like that. And so then when I brought all of that to her, then she helped me kind of like present it to the other boutiques so I can start getting my stuff in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a blessing.
It was.
So you said, however, that living in Baltimore was difficult for you.
It was.
Because you were unsupervised, just like you were
Yes.
unsupervised in college, right?
Yes.
But you were unsupervised, and were you by yourself, or did you have family in Baltimore?
So my dad was living actually near around here.
Okay.
Or actually closer to the church. And I would pop in and out of there. But for the most part, my dad was traveling. My mom at this point was living in Florida. She had a house in Maryland, but she was down in Florida, and I was kind of just up here. So if I didn't have a party to go to or a boyfriend's house to be at, then I might sneak in late, sleep on my dad's couch, and then leave in the mornings. But I didn't really have like a stable place to call my own at that point.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that, you would sometimes stay at your boyfriend's homes or living in and out of your car. Was that the case?
Yep.
So, I mean, just talk about just where were you emotionally and mentally?
I had gotten used to when I was not drinking and not getting high, just being depressed. So it was always about trying to find the party and find what everybody was doing, what was going on, and keeping myself busy so I wouldn't have to sit with myself. And so that's kind of where I had gotten to. It was just kind of like, nothing's panning out, nothing's working out. Let me just try to have fun and be fun. And that was kind of my thing, trying to dress up nice, trying to look cool, and then going out and finding a party. That was pretty much the gist of it. So I never really got to really look at my situation and sit in it because I didn't want to. So I didn't really look at the fact that I didn't have a home and that some nights I was spending in my car, and a lot of the times also because I was too intoxicated to get where I was going, which is another issue. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So at some point, you are in a relationship and it leads to pregnancy.
Yes.
So talk about that.
So, my now husband, at the time, we were on and off since high school. And we would break up, we would date other people, and then we would get back together. So this was one of those instances where we had broken up, and this time was probably the longest time we didn't speak to each other.
Okay.
And so I thought it was kind of like over, and it was really sad for me. And I started to date this other guy, and then Eric, my husband, he like just popped back up. All of a sudden he sent me a text and he was like, can we meet up? I have some Christmas and birthday gifts for you because my birthday's so close to Christmas. I was like, okay. So he came back and we started talking and hanging out again. And, every now and then he would come and but all the while I was still kind of talking to this guy who he ended up being very abusive and he was an alcoholic. And so that's kind of like how we started hanging out, was on the party scenes. And so it was very hard to get rid of him because of the abuse. He would like lash out. There were times that we would break up and he would sit outside of my dad's apartment waiting for me to get home. Because once he and I were done, I stopped staying over there. And so he would know that I'd either be at my dad's house or with Eric. And so that became a lot.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Did your dad know what was going on?
He had an idea. We talked about it later. He knew that I was in trouble when he was coming home one day and he heard yelling and shouting and screaming, and he was like, thought it was odd, you know, because he lived in like luxury apartments. And then all of a sudden he was like, I think that's my apartment. And then he walked in and he realized that I was being screamed at. And so he said it crushed him. Like, he didn't know what to do. And in that moment, because he kind of saw where I was. Like, I couldn't see where I was, but he realized that this was the life that I was building for myself, and he was at a loss as to why. Yeah.
Wow. So when you found out you were pregnant, what were your emotions at the time?
I cried. I was upset. I was very upset. I think I probably took like 3 tests. Very, 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 very upset. Very disappointed in myself. I'm now like on top of the disappointment that was already there. Now I'm like sick with myself. I'm just like, what is this? What are you doing? And I just felt like that was it. Like, my life, what I had wanted for my life now wasn't going to happen. It was just, I had to do something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much where I was.
And how old were you?
This was right after college. So maybe I'm like 24.
24.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Or how old are you when you get out of college? About 23?
21?
21?
22?
Oh, so then maybe I'm like 22, 23 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're just going through so much emotionally, you know, after finding out that you were pregnant. And at some point in your pregnancy, something happened.
Yeah.
So talk about, you know, what was the turning point with your pregnancy?
So I can't remember which checkup it was, but I was going to like a routine checkup, and the doctor was like, you know, do you think your water broke or anything like that? And I was like, no. And they were like, well, it looks like you're going into premature labor, so we're going to send you to the hospital. They sent me to the hospital and basically did some kind of procedure to stop the premature labor. And then after that, I was on bed rest. And pretty much they told me like I couldn't work, I couldn't go anywhere. I just had to lay down, and they gave me a bunch of medicines. And so that went on for probably like another month and a half. So at this point, I'm probably like 5.5 months pregnant. Okay. And I went to at this point, I'm going to the doctor weekly. And I went to another like routine checkup. And he was like, it's happening again. You're going into labor again. And I was like, okay. So they sent me to the hospital. And this time I'm in there for, I think, like a week. Or maybe 2 weeks, because I think, or maybe a week and a half, because the goal was to get me to 6 weeks pregnant and then transfer me to Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
So at that point, I think maybe after being at the hospital for a week, they had me like on an incline bed with my legs up, and in my sleep, my water broke. And so I woke up the next morning, and the woman's like, no, I think you just had an accident. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And so finally they checked, and they're like, yeah, you're going into labor. And so at that point, then the doctor came in and he said, you have a choice to make. And he was like, you know, the chances of the baby surviving at, I think I was a week shy from 6 months at our facility is very slim. He said, but if we continue to give you IV fluids, and then you're risking the chance of you going septic and dying. So yeah. So at that point, I was so like just discouraged with how my life had been going. I didn't see what the point of was saving my life over the baby's life.
Wow.
And so I told the doctor that I was gonna, you know, I wasn't gonna let them induce me, and that I was gonna hold on and see what happened. So yeah.
Wow. Okay. So at what point did you actually lose the baby?
So I think maybe it was at that point, it had only been 24 hours. I went to go to the bathroom, and I like heard God tell me, he said, you know, like to trust him, to have faith. And so basically encouraging me to go ahead and deliver. And I thought in that instant that he was going to save both of us. And so I came out. My mom was hysterical because she was like, "You're giving up. This is like passive suicide." Like, she's freaking out. She's like, "You're going to leave me here with this baby." And I came out and I told her, I was like, "Call the doctor." And I said, I think we're going to be okay. I think I heard from God. Because also when I had gotten pregnant, I realized I was like, I'm a terrible person. I'd make a horrible mom. So at that point, like, I'd really been trying to talk to God, and I had like church on TV all the time. And I was always trying to read my Bible and catch rides to church and things like that. Because at this point now I don't even have a car. And I was like, God, you have to make me like a mom. Like, you're going to have to show me like make me a good person for this person. And so at that point, like, I'm, starting to converse with God and stuff. So my faith is really built up in this moment. And so my mom called the doctor in, and I told him, I said, you guys can go ahead and induce me. They set me up for a time slot, and I went forward with it. And then she had a heartbeat. They had her hooked up. And then as soon as I gave birth, the heartbeat stopped.
Wow.
Yeah. And they put her in my arms, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did God ever reveal to you why he told you to go ahead and proceed with delivery?
I needed to experience that in order to fully give my life to Christ. Like, as tragic as it was life-changing. And I know after the fact, I was laying in bed one night, and, God was basically like, her life had to be sacrificed so that you could see how important your life is.
Wow.
Because in my mind, like, there was nothing for me to do. Like, college was it. I didn't succeed, so that's it, But God was like, no, there's so much that I want you to do, that I need you to be here, and even be here without your daughter, because I had to sign a birth certificate. She was born alive. I had to do a funeral service. That was my daughter. She has a first, middle, and last name, and I had to learn how to get past that and learn how to still be thankful and still be grateful and full of joy and not judge myself for that experience. And I think that was a lot of why I had to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really powerful. God has a very mysterious way of doing things.
Absolutely.
So you shared with me that after your baby's funeral, you drove straight to Florida with your mom, right?
Yes.
So what was the inspiration behind that?
So I just needed to get away. So at this point, Eric and I are still like on the outs.
Okay.
My ex is still at this point, he's been calling my mom and threatening her, my brothers, and me. He's trying to find me. So it was just like a situation. Wow. He was very angry that I had gotten pregnant. And, because that let him know that I was with somebody else. So in his mind, he had to, I guess, get vengeance or whatever. But
so it wasn't him. It was actually someone else.
It was Eric. Yeah.
Oh, it was Eric.
Yes, it was Eric. Yeah.
Oh, this whole time I'm thinking it's...
No. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this was Eric.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's where it kind of caused some kind of conflict between us because, I'm in the middle of breaking up with this guy. And then, Eric is like being Eric. Back in the day, Eric was Mr. Cool. So it was like a lot going on. And I just had to like get out of that environment. I needed to start fresh. And so originally the plan wasn't to stay in Florida. Apparently my mom had other plans. My mom is a whole force to be reckoned with. But I was supposed to be, so when I had gotten pregnant, I decided to go back to school to be a teacher because I was trying to think, okay, what can I do and take care of my kid at the same time? So I had already been teaching preschool since I was 18. So I was like, all right, I'll be a school teacher and that way I can have summers off. I can get off when I was trying to like think about what kind of kid I was. I was like, I need to be home when my kid gets home from school. Like I need to be there in the summers. Yeah. So I went back to get my master's in education. And that was the other thing. I think God did that so that I could become a teacher because that wasn't going to happen any other way. And so, So anyway, so I was going down to Florida, but it was only supposed to be for a month until I got my refund check from school. And then I was going to move to California with my friends. And that's just not what God had for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Okay. So you get to Florida, right? And I remember you said that you went to a church service. Was that the same day?
Same day. Oh, it was a long day.
Wow.
So the church service was in the morning, and I think their services were like at 7 or something like that. I don't even know how my mom managed, but she drove us straight to Florida
From Maryland.
And we got there and we went to, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. No, I think it's Wednesday night services that they have. And we went to Wednesday night service that night. And that's how we thought my mom was drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, we thought she was way out there.
Yeah.
Because my mom was very abusive when we were coming up.
Okay.
And she went down to Florida and came back with this softness that I had never seen in her before.
Wow.
And the way she spoke was, she was a new person, and it was freaky to us. We used to joke that, like she was in a cult. Like, we didn't know what was going on because
Who
she
is
was
this
just,
woman?
Exactly. So then when she
Wow.
drives me straight to this church, me and my other brother, one of my brothers, Julian, he was with us at the time, and we were just like, oh, here we go. This is how serious she is. It's like, she's going to drive us straight to the cult.
Right.
So we got in there, and I remember, I'm not a crier. And if I feel like I'm going to cry, it usually comes out as like anger. So I remembered at this point, like, I'm probably the saddest that I've ever been in my life. And I don't even know what to do with it. At this point, like, the people who'd passed away around me, I never had relationships with them. So I never really had lost anyone that I was very close with. And so, like, there's this sadness that I was unfamiliar with, and I felt it. It was like heavy, and it just felt like this blanket, this pressure all over me. Like, felt like my lungs wouldn't fill up to capacity. Just everything just was like, everything felt like it was exhausting. It was just a lot. And I remember walking into the church service not wanting to be there. I'm also not an extrovert at all. So, like, just even meeting new people, like, all of this feels like a lot after, like, the past 2 weeks have been a whirlwind.
Absolutely.
I'm literally only have the clothes on my back, a lip gloss in my pocket. Like, I have nothing, and I'm just down there, and I'm like, I felt like it was very selfish of her to, like, put me in this situation, and I didn't see what she was trying to do at the time. And then at the end of service, she was being mentored by a man named Pastor Bourdain. And she asked him to come and pray for me. And I remember that with first prayer was like the beginning of that heaviness lifting off. And I remembered all of a sudden, like, being able to see around me and see that things were clearer a little bit. It was like this weird, like, wait a minute, what just happened kind of moment. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you already explained just that whole. I'm just trying to picture you're leaving your baby's funeral.
Yeah.
And you get in the car with your mom.
Yeah.
And your brother, right?
Yeah, and her friend. And
her
they'd all
friend.
been there to witness everything, too. So it's just real awkward.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a long drive.
A long drive.
I'm sure you're probably tired at that service, right?
Yes.
But God just showed up mightily in that moment when he prayed for you. So,
Yeah.
That's amazing. So your parents were afraid. You kind of touched on it, I think, when you said that you were in the hospital, that your mom said this is passive suicide, right? Were there other moments where they were afraid about you being suicidal?
Yeah. So apparently my mom had been afraid the whole time that I was pregnant. I really didn't want to have the baby. I wouldn't even let people throw me a baby shower. And I was just really disappointed in myself. I also, once I found out it was a girl, I became very depressed. Because my mom and I had such a strained relationship, and I didn't want that with my daughter. And I didn't even know how to begin to not have a relationship like that with my daughter. I just was very stressed out thinking about how do you do that better. So I think it was just kind of that in that season, I wasn't like taking care of myself. Like I'd put my hair in a bun and like leave it there. And like just my mom knew that I was very particular about how I looked and how I took care of myself and like how I carried myself, and like kind of all of that went on the back burner. And she just saw me slowly just not living anymore.
So at some point, you began attending lay minister classes at this church. So what inspired that? Was that something that you wanted to do, or?
No. Pretty much it was just to the point where my mom wanted me to go everywhere she was going. She wanted me fully submerged. So lay ministry classes, what she was taking, so that's what I was taking. If she went to church on Monday, I went. If she was doing ministry on Saturday, I went. So that's pretty much how it was. And that's why I was in church every single day, because she was in church every single day. Yeah.
Wow. So were you actually gaining from these classes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially in the lay ministry class. Like I had told you previously, Pastor Bourdain even let me take the test and write the essay and stuff like that, and actually complete the course, because I just was hungry. I went all in, and you know, it was just on from there.
Wow.
You know? Yeah.
Wow. So, you know, did your mom notice your growth? Was she, you know, did she notice? Was she observant of that? And how was your relationship with her? Was it growing? Was it getting better? Talk about that.
So she definitely noticed that I was growing. She was really excited about the fact that she wished that she knew Jesus as young as I was, and was excited about the potential for my life knowing Christ so young. But you know, it definitely changed our relationship. Even me becoming pregnant kind of changed our relationship a little bit, because I was able to appreciate my mom from a different perspective and really think about, like, despite all the reasons we didn't get along, I really had a respect for the sacrifice that she made for us as our mom. So we did grow in that aspect, but it still wasn't a good place for me to live. You know, I think I stayed there maybe a year and a half or 2 years, and then I ended up moving out.
Okay.
Again. Yeah.
Now, your siblings, how were they taking note of you?
So my brother, who had driven down to Florida with me, he actually ended up giving his life to Christ as well. You know, really seeing that I've changed and things like that. My other brother thought that I had joined the cult as well. He was like a little freaked out, because, you know, it was such an extreme difference from how I was. And then
like what happened with your mom,
cussing,
right?
I'm not drinking. Yeah, it was like a totally different thing. And he's like, wait a minute. You know, and so then when he came down and saw in person, he really saw that, you know, I had changed for real. Like, it was in my heart. My heart had changed. So
I love that.
Good. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So in a particular class that you were attending, you mentioned that, you know, some people there laid hands on you, and it was just such a powerful moment, and it was a breakthrough for you.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
Yeah, so I remember that was a really impactful day, because there was this I had this desire for this feeling. That heaviness was still on me. I was still very much depressed, but, you know, I had hope now. And I would, you know, go to the pool and try to sink myself at the bottom of the pool to just feel this feeling. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I needed this pressure feeling on me. And so one day they were doing prayer, and they called me up, and I went up to the front, and it was Miss Cheryl, Miss Angie, and Pastor Bourdain, and they laid hands on me, and I just remembered that feeling that I had been looking for, that pressure, almost like a hug from God. It was just like this. It was not bad pressure, but it was just like this squeeze, and it just felt so good. And when I finally came to, I was laid out on the ground in tears, and I just, that moment, all of a sudden, it was like that heaviness had broken off of me. And it was really catapulted me into where I was like going. In my relationship. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So as it catapulted you, you delved much deeper into just your relationship and the things of God. So just talk about that, you know, now that you're renewed and the pressure is off, and, you know, talk about how your relationship was at this point. And also, were you meeting any friends that were Christian? Talk about that.
So at this point, I guess as hard as I went when I found out that I could be free at school is how hard I went for God. Like I would stay up all night reading the Bible. Like I didn't need sleep. I wanted to go to the classes now. I wanted to be in church. I started teaching missionettes on Wednesdays, like anything that I could do to volunteer at the church. I wanted to be there, hand out waters, whatever it was. And I was just excited. I was on fire, that new feeling you get when you give your life to Christ. And, but I was still leery about friends. I had real. This one friend, and she was very persistent, and she was in the lay ministry classes. I would see her at the prayer meetings. She was at all the stuff, and she was the other person in the group that was my age. I think she was a little older than me, and she just wanted to be my friend so bad. And I love her now. I'm so glad that we're friends. I'm glad that she was persistent, but I'm not a very social person, but she insisted. And so we ended up living together. When I moved out of my mom's house, she actually was the one to come and pick me up, and she took me to her place. And she would let me use her car during the day. She was great. She was a great friend. And she had another friend staying with her too. So it was 3 of us in a 1-bedroom apartment. I ended up getting an apartment, and the 2 of them moved in with me.
Oh, okay.
And so she had these friends from Bethune-Cookman, which was up the street from us, and they were all saved as well. And we used to have these worship sessions. I remember I was getting my master's degree the first time they came over, and I was like, what is this? I thought we were going to have a study session. And they came out, whipped their guitars out, and they were banging on things and singing. And it was like the most free. I never been around people my age like that too, also, that were just on fire for God. And God just gave me this beautiful season of about 3 years where I was just immersed in Him. It was, I worked at a Christian place. I hung out with Christians. I went to church every day. It was just this beautiful incubation season in my life.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. That's amazing. So did you ever have any moments where you wanted to go back to your past, even in the midst of all of that?
I would never say that I wanted to fully go back. Like I probably spent most of my childhood, most of college, just depressed, just not happy. So I can't say that I ever wanted to go back to feeling like that. Of course, there were times, when there were certain things that would come up that I couldn't do, or it felt like I couldn't do, that I was just like, oh, well. But the beautiful thing is that God showed me early on that my relationship with Him wasn't about rules. Don't do this and don't do that. That as long as I stayed in communion with Him and read His word and had a heart for Him, He would show me exactly what was for me and what wasn't for me. I didn't have to worry about, which was my problem with church from before, was it felt like this list of rules that nobody could obey, but they was going to come at you about making sure you were on it. And so then it became, God was like, no, tithing isn't a rule. Tithing is something you get to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not getting drunk is not a rule. It's let's talk about your spirit and this relationship with this and why you're doing this. And so it became like a whole different way to look at God and what He was keeping me safe from. So I can't ever say that I've ever wanted to go back. Do I struggle? Absolutely. Like everybody else, but I've never been like, oh, being a Christian is too much. Quite the opposite. Like sometimes when I get really low, I just go, God, I don't even know how I could do life without you, because I had a glimpse. He was there. I was never without Him. He was always talking to me and with me. That was part of the grace in my life. But that darkness, I would never want to go back to that dark place.
I know that's right. I've been there before too, and don't want to go back. Don't want to go back. Absolutely. At some point, I believe Eric comes back into your life, right?
Yes.
So talk about that. And did he move to Florida?
He did. Okay. So Eric's another persistent friend in my life. So when I moved to New York, it was part of it was to get away from him.
Okay.
And he would even drive my boyfriend up to New York to come see me. That's how persistent Eric was, that I was going to see his face. So I moved to Florida.
Wow.
And I pretty much cut everybody off except for my 2 best friends in California. And Eric was one of them. And I called him up one day and I told him, I said, I've experienced what real love is, and I realized that I don't love you. And I left it at that. And that was the last time I spoke to him for like over a year.
So when was that? At what point?
When I gave my life to Christ.
When you gave your life to Christ. Okay.
Between realizing the love that I had for my daughter, and I knew her for seconds, you know what I mean? Like that total turnaround from not wanting her to just being overwhelmed with love for this person that I don't know. And that made me like reevaluate. I was like, wait a minute, do I love these people? So that's why it made it easy for me to clean the slate. And so I came back up to Maryland for a funeral, and my friend Keith had picked me up with Eric in the back seat. And so that's how Eric came back in the picture.
Okay.
So then, you know, I gave him my new number and we started talking again. And, you know, one day my mom was like, you know, I think that Eric's your husband. And oddly enough, before I even had started talking to Eric again, I was standing in the foyer about to go pick up my little brother from the bus stop. And I heard God was putting the leash on the dog. And I heard God say that Eric was my husband. And I can't remember verbatim what the words were, but I remembered standing up and being so frustrated and shaking my head like, that can't even be right.
No, normally when God reveals to a woman that this is your husband, it's like, oh my God, really, God?
Yeah.
But for you,
I was like, no, there's no way, because I had already been done with that chapter of my life and I wasn't even talking to him anymore. And even just the experience of, you know, Eric didn't come to the hospital. Like, it was just like this whole,
Okay.
And so, you know, I was just, that door was closed.
Yep.
So for me, that felt inconvenient. It didn't feel like where I was going. I was like, there's plenty of Christian men around me. And like at this time, you know, like as far as I know, Eric's not even a Christian, you know what I mean? When I was in college, he had said, you know, he gave his life to Christ, this and the third, that he couldn't hang out with me if I was still going to be partying and so on and so forth. He had said all these things, but then was still partying.
Gotcha.
So for me, I was like, no, like now that I know what Christianity is, I'm like, I'm good. So I was not excited about that revelation at all. And quite frankly, I didn't think it was God. Like at that moment, like it felt like it in my spirit. And I was, you know, not afraid, but you know, that feeling you get, that reverence. And I was just like, but I was like, there's no way that the Lord would tell me to go back. So it got to the point where Eric's calling me, and then he was like all the time, and he's, what would it take for you to move back to Maryland? And I told him, I said, I would never go back to Egypt. That's what I told him.
Larry, yes.
I told him
God delivered me out of bondage from that place. I am not going
never
back.
Why would I go back? That doesn't. And I told him, I said, I don't go back. I don't go backwards in my life. Like I was so adamant about it. Here we are. I live in Maryland, but like, I was so not coming. Yeah. And that's how he came to be in Florida. Because I was adamant, and he called me one day and he started like, it didn't even make sense. He was talking about, you know, I see myself hunting for you. Like he just starts like saying scriptures and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, like, just no. And I was like, well, come down here and let's see what happens. Let me reintroduce you to my family. Let's see. So he came for a visit. And everyone was just so excited about him. And I'm like, since when? Like, everything changed. And I'm like,
wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And so then I kept then all of a sudden, like, I felt like that feeling for him. And I was just like, gosh. So we would put wagers out there. I'd never been fishing before. And I said, you know, if I catch more fish than you, then you gotta move down here. And if you find a job, I caught 21 pounds of catfish. He caught none. He found a job. He found several jobs in 1 week while he was down here visiting, or down in Florida visiting. I mean, everything. I told him anything that we put out there as a wager to see if he was supposed to be down there. That happened. It was like the sheep, the lambs. Is it wet? Is it dry? That's how it was. And it was just like every time. Okay. So by the end of summer, Eric packed up all his stuff, and for the first time, he left Carroll County and moved down to Florida.
Wow.
Yep. And so that's how we started back up.
Now, how long had you been in Florida at this point?
At that point, I had been in Florida for about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. So I had already finished my master's, started teaching at my
Mm-hmm.
first school, and he moved about 30 minutes from my house.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. So, when did you guys decide to move to Maryland? And I can't remember. Well, no, I do remember. You guys got married here in Maryland.
Yes.
So at what point did you both decide to go back or to come back home?
So I wasn't going to come. I was pretty adamant about that. And even at this point, Eric had taken me engagement ring shopping. He'd been talking about getting married.
Mm-hmm.
But I still wasn't convinced. There were still some things that I was seeing in him that didn't make me feel like I was ready to uproot my life like that. And so I guess it was the December before we got engaged. His mom's health was really bad. She'd been battling cancer for, I think, about 5 years at that point. And it was getting really bad. So he was thinking about moving back up to Maryland. And I encouraged him to do so. But he wanted me to quit my job and come up. And I told him, I said, unless we're engaged and we have a wedding date set, I'm not going to quit my job and move from my home. And I'm not doing that. So that's where we left it. He left his dog with me so I could take care of him, take care of the dog while he was taking care of his mom. And then he asked me if I would fly up for Valentine's Day, and he flew me up, and that's when he proposed. And he was like, I want to get married as soon as possible, and I want you to come move to Maryland with me. So that began that process. That was about 5 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's definitely an amazing story, and I just want you to say now, today, your relationship with God now, what does it mean to you?
Not to sound cheesy, it's everything. When I wake up in the morning, my alarm says, "The joy of the Lord is your strength," and that literally is what keeps it going. I come from generations of the depression curse on my family and anxiety and all of that stuff. And if it wasn't for God and his truth and his word, I would just be a hot mess. Like I would literally just worry all the time and be anxious all the time and upset all the time and judge myself and criticize myself all the time into doing nothing. And because God wakes me up every morning and he loves on me every day. And because I have that relationship with him, I can choose to do great every day. And so he's the fuel. He's what keeps me going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you could tell your younger self something, what would it be?
I guess, that I was beautiful, that you're beautifully and wonderfully made, and that no matter what it looks like on the outside, no matter what everybody else is doing, no matter what everybody else says, if you listen to what God says, you stick with God, then it's going to be great. Everything's going to be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, Tatiana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for just sharing a bit of your story, because I know that there's more, but you shared only a portion. But what you shared, I know is going to bless many people. And I do admire just your strength, because I didn't know that old Tatiana. I know the renewed one. But I just, based off of what you shared, the work of God, the hand of God is all on you. Just based on who I see you as today. Sometimes, that saying, I don't look like what I've been through.
Yes, exactly.
I would have never known any of that, any of that, because of how far God has brought you.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, God.
Yes.
Thank you, God.
Thank you, Jesus.
So I want you to shout out your business. If you want to shout out your, is it TikTok handle? Is that what it's called? I know it's Instagram handle.
It is a TikTok handle.
Okay.
I actually don't know what it is. To be honest.
Okay. Well, and when I edit, I'll make sure I
put it. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
So just go ahead and tell a little bit about your business.
So I'm actually a watercolor artist, and I make prints of my artworks. So prints you can hang, prints you can wear. I have a Society 6 page that you can get rugs, quilts, tables, anything with my watercolors on it. So that's pretty much where I'm going right now. So it's AWL Art and Design, and it stands for Always with Love.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I wondered what it meant. What it stood for. Okay.
Always
now I know.
love.
And you have one of your designs in your shirt.
Yes, I do actually have one of my designs on now. That's on my Society 6 page.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome stuff. And I know you're not too comfortable with shouting out yourself,
No.
but I'm still going to ask you a question about your art.
Cool.
So is your art a bit abstract? I asked that because I'm looking at your shirt, right? And it's clearly someone's face.
Yes.
But there's flowers around the face. So explain what that means and what some of your art means.
Okay. So, yeah. So, I would say it's some of it's abstract, some of it's surreal. But so we're about to... So a lot of the faces and stuff you see is from my collection called Proverbs 31.
Okay.
Well, it's called 31, but it's based on Proverbs 31. And it's kind of a coming of age collection. So when I was turning 31 is when I did this collection. My grandma had just passed away, and I was living in floor home, no internet, no TV, no cell phone service, no nothing. And so I had a lot of time to create. And so these faces would come to my head and these design ideas. And basically the premise of it is each one is titled with a line from Proverbs 31.
Okay.
And the premise of it is how... Even in Proverbs, you see the juxtaposition of the woman. It's like you're working, but you're also taking care of your kids. And so it's like all these different things. And so a lot of the time, and during this time, I'm grieving my grandmother, and I'm going to work in front of kids and smiling. And I'm putting on the show, and I'm dressing nice and putting the makeup on. So a lot of my drawings, you'll see the woman might be crying, or she might have a pensive look or an angry look, but then there's flowers and butterflies, and the colors are very soft. And so it's kind of the two sides of the woman. It's the beauty that we present, but at the same time, we're also warriors. And so that's what a lot of my artwork is based off of.
I love that. I love that because I would see some of your pictures, and I just would think, I want to ask her, what does it mean? What does it represent?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. I love talking about my work.
Okay.
Yeah. Once I get going, I can talk. Yeah. But if somebody's like, tell me about your stuff, I'm like, it's art.
just move the chair to the front, right?
Exactly.
Got you. Well, that's good stuff. Go ahead and make sure you follow her on TikTok, right?
Yes, I am on TikTok. I think it's AWL Art, and also on Instagram as well. It's AWL Art, and I'm on Facebook as well with my name, so you should be able to find me on there. And from there, you can find everything else.
Good stuff. Thank you. I appreciate it. Go check out, y'all.
Thank you.
So before we end, I just want you to share any wisdom, any advice for anybody out there who maybe has lived a past life similar to yours, or maybe they're in it now and they don't know what to do. Maybe they're hopeless. Maybe someone out there has lost a child. Any advice, any encouragement that you want to give, just flow.
God doesn't waste anything. Every situation, every trial, every circumstance, every heartache, everything, even the people that are in your life that don't mean well for you, God doesn't even waste that. He uses everything to make something awesome. And if you look for the awesome, you'll see it, but if you look at what's happening, then you'll miss it.
That's right.
And so I want everybody to be encouraged to look for God's hand, even when it's messy.
That's good. That's good. Well, y'all heard it. Thank you again, Tatiana, for being on. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for tuning into this episode. I hope that you were blessed and encouraged. And I want you to leave a comment just letting me know something that stood out today. Be sure to like the episode. Be sure to share it with someone. Subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, everyone, be blessed and have a wonderful day.